Drove my daughter to a brunch filled with sport collectors and promises of luxury, and now she's finally choosing herself over billionaires. I'm a 47-year-old man, navigating a situation with my 20-year-old daughter that's really starting to worry me. My wife is 46, and while she isn't my daughter's biological mother, she's been a steady presence in her life since my daughter turned 13. My daughter's mother struggled with alcoholism, which ultimately led to our divorce when my daughter was 12. Over the past year, I've watched my daughter become completely fixated on the notion that the only path to happiness is marrying a billionaire. I suspect social media has fueled this obsession, but I can't say for certain. She isn't doing well in school. Her academic performance has plummeted, which is a stark contrast to her past. Now all she talks about is marrying a billionaire, the logistics of meeting one, what kind of house they'll share, how she'll travel in private jets, the whole fantasy, mapped out. She's not just talking about it, she's actively taking steps to try to make it happen, which is what has me so deeply concerned. For instance, she spent evenings sitting in hotel lobbies and bars, sipping drinks and trying to catch the attention of wealthy, older men. I need to clarify, we aren't poor, and my daughter has never dealt with serious financial insecurity. Still, we're not living anywhere near billionaire territory. My wife has a brother who is quite well off, and my daughter has made an obvious effort to get closer to him and his family, seemingly in pursuit of wealth. It escalated to the point where she shared selfies from their family home on her social media, violating their privacy. She's now no longer welcome there. She's pulled similar stunts with other friends and family who have even slightly more lavish lifestyles, sharing photos and inserting herself into their world. I've also discovered that she attempted to connect with my own work acquaintances who hold more glamorous positions than I do. I only learned about it after some of them reached out to me, showing me what my daughter had sent them on LinkedIn of all places. Her messages were suggestive, and in at least one instance, she straight up asked someone to buy her expensive jewelry. This behavior is so out of character for her. She's intelligent, always excelled in school until recently. She made it into a good university, speaks multiple languages, and even wrote a pretty successful book at 16. Something has changed inside her, though, and I'm at a complete loss as to what triggered this all-consuming obsession with money. Currently, she's temporarily staying with us while she looks for a new apartment. For the past several days, she's hardly left her bed. She cries daily, grieving over the fact that she doesn't have a billionaire boyfriend or husband, and laments that she has to stay in accommodations less glamorous than she desires. The weeping is constant and raw, as if she's mourning a great loss. Every morning, the sound of her sobbing fills the house. I've tried to reach her, gently comforting her, assuring her she'll find someone to love her as much as I do. She shoots back with biting words like, "Yeah, but he'll probably be broke, so I don't care." I tried a more straightforward, perhaps harsh, approach, telling her the stark reality: only a minuscule fraction of the world's population are billionaires, and most of them marry within their own circles or are already married, so the odds of this billionaire romance are basically zero. My wife thinks I'm being cruel, arguing that I didn't have to destroy our daughter's dreams like that, defending the idea that our daughter is still young and should be allowed her fantasies. But I disagree. There's a line between dreaming and living in a delusion when it starts harming you and those around you. It's alarming to me that she's violated the boundaries of people in our lives and allowed this obsession to negatively impact her schooling and well-being. And the race she's putting herself in by trying to seduce much older men is both dangerous and deeply unsettling. I fear she's headed for real harm. I've already started reaching out to therapists, and I'm currently combing through my daughter's very public social media presence, searching for any glaring red flags that might put her at risk. I'm desperate for insight, for ways to help her out of this mental spiral. This fixation on wealth isn't the only thing eating at me. What happened to love? I understand love doesn't pay the bills, but is there something so wrong about seeking a partner with a stable income doing something that fulfills them? Stability isn't exclusive to luxury. Why does her partner have to be incredibly rich for her to approve? Maybe I'm just showing my age, but I can't help feeling disheartened by how widespread this attitude has become among her generation. A few hours have passed since all this truly crystallized in my mind, and I still have no response from the therapists I've contacted. It's Sunday, after all. If my daughter decides she wants therapy, I'll pay for it in a heartbeat. Some people have blamed me for enabling her, and I'm still processing how I feel about that. I've covered the essentials: her education, her rent, her travel. If she wants to see her cousin, someone I genuinely believe is a fantastic role model, she's a successful woman I'd want my daughter to look up to. I don't cover my daughter's luxuries. When she's asked for designer things or trips to places like Monaco, I've told her she'd need to get a tutoring job or something similar if she wants those things. She needs to truly understand the value of money. Yes, I've bought her some nice things: a phone, a tablet, a MacBook, but only on the condition that they are used to boost her studies or improve her life in tangible ways. I continued my investigation and did a deep dive into her TikTok and Instagram. She has multiple profiles, but left a breadcrumb trail by following her own accounts. And yes, I found what I was dreading. She's reposted content from a slew of influencers' content that's often surprisingly misogynistic, just wrapped in glitz and glam. So many posts echo the sentiment that a rich man will always choose a poorer, but skinny waitress over an overweight CEO, or they showcase endless shopping hauls and luxury gifts from supposed boyfriends or husbands. Post after post, she's absorbed toxic messages about how men can't love and what women should look like to hook a rich guy. There are videos of women screaming at their cameras to wake up and stop dating brokies. It's poisonous, the kind of stuff that can rot your brain. Her own feed is packed with photos from upscale restaurants, places where 12-course dinners run well over €200 per person. She's not employed, so someone else is footing the bill. The disconnect between who she was and who she is now is so stark, it makes my heart ache. I just want my daughter back. I want the bright, ambitious, loving woman I knew, someone who could measure her own worth, and her partner's, by more than the size of a bank account. I started noticing things about my daughter that deeply concerned me, things that I simply couldn't ignore anymore. She began talking a lot about luxury, about status, about what she called high-value women. There was one post she made that truly alarmed me. It described her belief that women who sought out handsome men were trashy, and that women with real worth should seek out men for their resources, never their looks. I could hardly believe what I was reading. It was like she was parroting values from another world. But what really pushed me over the edge was when I discovered a post where she talked about this content creator club. Apparently, she'd spent $500 money from her own savings and, I should say, some that I'd given her on coaching sessions led by a Russian influencer. This woman built her online persona around boasting about men flying her to St. Moritz and dropping $20,000 on her plastic surgeries for a so-called glow-up. It reeked of a scam to me, just another way to suck money from young women desperate to be rich and famous. This woman flaunted the easy money she was making off these girls, and it absolutely infuriated me. I found all of this through my daughter's public profiles. Thankfully, after talking to her, she agreed to make everything private. But by then, the damage felt done. Faced with all this, I finally sat her down for a real talk. I started off by making it clear, she's an adult, and her decisions about dating, about her life are hers to make. Still, I owed it to her to share my worries. I asked gently about the kinds of guys she dates, making it clear she didn't owe me answers, but that I hoped for an open dialogue if for no other reason than our peace of mind. She confessed, she's been going on dates with much older men between 30 and 60. As her dad, I felt sick to my stomach, but I did everything in my power to keep the conversation safe for her, because if something ever were to happen, God forbid, I want her to always come to me. I pressed her about why she was so determined to be with much older, rich guys, and what she hoped to gain that she didn't already have in her life. All she talked about were private jets, shopping trips, and big houses. Sure, those things are seductive, but I warned her none of it is worth risking her future. I told her the chances of falling into financial abuse or worse are so much higher than she realizes. She brushed off my concern, bragging that she's too smart to be taken advantage of. That stung, but I had to keep going. I brought up the ugly examples out there, asked her if she heard about the E-Files, the real-life horror stories of young women conned and abused by wealthy men. She didn't even know about it, and seemed to care even less. Eventually, I turned the conversation to her own well-being. I'd seen her sobbing and asked if she was struggling with depression. That's when she finally let out, tears streaming down her face, unable to speak for a good 15 minutes. When she did, I braced myself for the worst. My mind reeled with all the nightmare scenarios a father fears. But it was something else entirely. She finally described how, about a year ago, she'd and her friend snuck into a party at a fancy hotel, a friend who was also deep into the provider man dating trend. That night, and in many nights that followed, all the wealthy older men seemed only interested in her friend. The guy my daughter had her eye on? He asked for her friend's number instead. This happened not just once, but over and over again. Months later at university, they found out about a guy a little older than them who happened to be the son of a multimillionaire. What started as a friendship quickly became a rivalry, both vying for this one guy. Her friend, the one she trusted, started spreading nasty rumors about her, and even tried to derail her weight loss journey, knowing my daughter had struggled her whole life with her weight. In the end, her friend snagged the millionaire's son and is now in a serious relationship with him. That was the heartbreak that consumed my daughter, the jealousy, the sense of betrayal, the feeling she'd lost out on the good life and been robbed by someone she once called a friend. I was surprised, honestly. I asked her, again and again, if anything else had happened. Anything. She kept insisting nothing had ever happened without her consent, and even told me she wasn't even sexually active. Bullying like this is no doubt traumatic, but still, something about my daughter's devastation felt deeper than just a rivalry gone bad. She claims she wants to stick with university, try again to pass classes she's missed, but I can see her struggling to really commit. So, here I am uncertain, anxious, hoping I haven't lost my daughter to some fantasy that will only lead to disappointment and danger. And I honestly don't know what my next steps should be. Yesterday was the first morning in weeks that didn't start with crying. It didn't feel like peace, exactly more like a held breath, but the house was quiet, and when I went to check on her, she was already up, hair in curlers, my wife's perfume hanging in a cloud around the doorway. She was on the floor with an open suitcase and an array of dresses she doesn't usually wear in daylight, legs stretched out, phone propped against a makeup bag playing some woman's voice about elegance being a discipline. She had her brunch with a so-called content creator club. She told me the hotel like she was saying a password. I offered to drive her. She rolled her eyes and said she wasn't 12. Then she grabbed my wife's heel and, almost as an afterthought, asked if I had cash in case the card machine acted weird again. I drove her anyway. I told her I had a meeting nearby, pretended to check emails in the car at red lights to give her something to be annoyed at other than me. The hotel was one of those places that somehow smells like polished stone and very expensive candles. There were women everywhere, girls, really done to the nines, same dress 3 different ways, same hair blown out within an inch of its life. The influencer I'd seen on my daughter's feed was real and loud and exactly as glossy as the screen made her look. An assistant in a too tight blazer shepherded them into a ballroom where the chairs were gold and the name cards said things like Muse and Diamantier. A different assistant floated table to table with a velvet pouch and a clipboard, telling them not to worry, their phones and passports would be kept safe so you can be fully present. That was said like a meditation instruction. I watched 2 girls pull out their passports from tiny handbags like they'd been told to treat this as normal, and maybe they had been. I wasn't invited anywhere, of course. I stood at the edge pretending to be glued to my phone, and a security guard eyed me like I was casing the place. The assistant tried to collect my daughter's phone. She glanced back at me and I could see the last strand of sense hold a second before she handed it over. The clipboard woman slid another paper at her, the kind printed with spaces for emergency contact and tier upgrade and something about a St. Moritz mastermind with a refundable placement deposit of $1,200 and if settled before 3 in the afternoon. I caught the word marina while some man in a blazer sheen like an oil spill was talking about cars waiting later. I found the concierge and said words I never imagined saying, that someone inside a private event was collecting passports from young women and asking for money for an offsite. The concierge didn't blink. He told me he'd had 3 complaints in the last month about similar bookings. He asked me to step aside and radioed someone. It took 10 minutes for hotel security to go in. Another 5 for the influencer to start yelling about defamation and private property. My daughter didn't see me watching from a column, her posture ratcheting from poise to panic to rigid fury in the span of 1 clipboard's worth of forms. The event was postponed due to venue miscommunication, which is an elegant way of saying no. Girls spilled out into the hallway, heels clicking like punctuation. The influencer did an Instagram story right there, calling out haters with poverty mindsets, and the assistant with the velvet pouch made a show of returning passports and phones like that made it all fine. On the stairs, my daughter turned on me with a face I haven't seen since she was a toddler who had been told no in a toy aisle. She accused me of following her like a creep, of ruining her one chance to be invited to something important. I told her I was there to drive her. I told her that asking teenagers for passports is not a brunch, it's a red flag on a flagpole you can see from space. She called me dramatic. An older man with hands like paper and a watch that could pay someone's mortgage leaned in as if offering sympathy and told my daughter, very low, that he liked that she had the right look and asked her if she'd be comfortable with an arrangement at $5,000 a month if she kept her weekends free. He never looked at me. He didn't even lower his eyes to see me. My daughter stood very still. For a second she looked pleased because arrangement has been packaged as romance, online, but then he kept talking and used a word he didn't bother to soften, and I watched the word hit her like a slap. She didn't say anything to him. She didn't need to. She walked past him without her ticket collector smile, bare ankles flashing at the edge of the borrowed heels, and said, "Let's go home." We didn't speak in the car. She kept both hands on her phone like someone expecting it to ring with an apology that would restore the fantasy in the exact shape it had been before somebody breathed on it. She opened her camera, took a photo of her face in profile, and then closed it without saving anything. Halfway home she asked me if I had her passport. I told her she had it. She checked her bag, found it, held it in her lap as if she had to remind herself it was hers. When we got home, she put the passport on the kitchen counter and slid it toward me and asked me to keep it for a while. I made a joke about being her safe deposit box and she didn't laugh, but she didn't make me give it back either. In the afternoon she went through her phone with a concentration I haven't seen in a year but used to see before exams. She started deleting. Not everything. Not forever. But the Russian influencer went. The club's group chat went. The private Instagram with the glittering bio went quiet. She asked if she had to tell me something, then took a breath the length of a paragraph and told me she had a credit card I didn't know about with a balance that made my stomach check out for a second. 8,300 of hair appointments and coaching and dinners where she posed with plates more expensive than the groceries I buy for a week. I didn't yell. I wanted to, and I didn't. We called the bank. We sat on hold. I could hear her breath getting thin and fast. We spoke to a woman named Angelica who sounded like she'd heard everything and told us what to write to dispute charges for services not rendered, how to freeze the card, how to set up payment plans that don't eat you alive. I made spaghetti because that is the only meal I can make without a recipe, and we ate standing up at the counter, and she told me, in a small voice, that they had told the girls to write down their blood types on the intake forms for insurance. I had to step into the hallway for a second because I did not want her to see what my face does when it tries to hold every version of fear at once. A therapist finally called back this morning. The kind woman on the other end had a voice like a good teacher on a rainy day. She had an opening at 11 if we could make it. We could. My daughter said she didn't want to go. Then she put her shoes on and went anyway. I sat in the waiting room and read the same paragraph of a magazine 3 times while a plant died in the corner as quietly as a plant can die. When she came out, she had that post-cry face, the puffy orbit of it, but she didn't try to hide it under her hair. She didn't say much other than that she told the truth. She said the word depression out loud and it didn't sound like a line from a video, it sounded like a thing she owned. The therapist asked me in 4 or 5 minutes and looked me in the eye and said, not unkindly, that our daughter's fixation is probably sitting on top of grief and shame and very old fears about being chosen. And being enough and that you can't argue those feelings out of someone with math. She said we needed to make the house boring for a while. Safe and boring. There were other ripples I didn't expect. The hotel emailed me back. They thanked me for the video I'd sent from the hallway, for the timestamps and the clipboard in the velvet pouch. They said they would be reviewing their event booking procedures. I received a furious email from an account calling itself Global Goddess Legal accusing me of harassment and theft of intellectual property because I'd filmed their private curriculum. I don't have the stamina to be intimidated by a Gmail address with a rose in the name, but I forwarded it to the hotel and the Consumer Protection Office anyway. 2 girls who'd been at the event found me through my daughter, which I am not thrilled about safety-wise, but they wrote that they'd had their passports taken at a dinner last month and didn't know how to get money back from a deposit that was suddenly non-refundable due to rudeness. I wrote them what Angelica had told us. I am a middle-aged man explaining chargebacks to teenagers I've never met because I can't do much else, and it is not the life I imagined, but it is the life right now. My wife's brother called. It was awkward and then it wasn't. He apologized for going no contact after the social media incident. He said he should have been more direct with boundaries before it got weird. He invited us for Sunday lunch if everyone could promise no photos and no post. My daughter nodded when I told her. That's all. Nod. It felt like something. This afternoon she went to campus for 2 hours. She didn't make it to the lecture, but she walked the garden path beside the old library and sat on a bench in the cold and sent me a picture of her shoes on the gravel. Not the shoe she wore yesterday. Trainers. Unremarkable. The caption said nothing except a sapling emoji she used when she was 16, and made up her own little shorthand for starting again. When she got home she didn't cry. She sat next to my wife on the sofa and let her touch her hair and asked if we could keep the passport in the cupboard drawer next to the TV for a while. That was her phrase. For a while. I don't know if any of the sticks. I don't know what happens when the next glossy video slinks across her screen with a promise wrapped in a bow. I don't know if we'll be able to keep her safe from every shark in a blazer smelling like bergamot and money. I do know that today, for the first time in a long time, the thing my daughter mourned wasn't a billionaire, it was the part of her that had been mowed flat by fantasy she doesn't even like the taste of anymore. I can work with grief. I can sit next to her while she grieves. I can stir sauce and keep the passports and be boring. I can wait while she chooses herself on purpose. The passport lived in the tea drawer for 2 nights and came out smelling faintly of bergamot, which made my wife laugh in a way that told me she was keeping her own breath shallow. On Monday I took my daughter to a hardware store I last went to when we needed a plunger. We stood in an aisle with safes that looked like microwaves and shoe boxes and bomb shelters for documents. She picked the smallest one and carried it against her chest all the way to the car like a sleeping cat. At home she put the passport in first, then the frozen credit card, then a pair of earrings I didn't know she had that caught the lights so cleanly it made my stomach twinge with the math of them. She closed the door and spun the dial and we listened to the click, which sounded exactly like a period at the end of a sentence. A reporter wrote to me plain subject line, my name spelled correctly. She said she'd been tracking luxury coaching group that book into hotels under motivational names and leave with deposits, dignity, and sometimes identification. We met in a cafe that still has sugar in bowls and spoons that don't match. She had a notebook with hairline rulings and wrote in a tight hand, asking permission at every turn, and I liked that she didn't try to fix her concern into a performance. My daughter came, hat pulled down, hair shoved through the back like she was threading herself into the smallest version of her body. She spoke in a low, even voice that I recognized from piano recitals when she used to steady herself before playing. She said the word passport softly, and then said the phrase blood type with her eyes on a crack in the tabletop. The reporter didn't flinch. She asked what the intake form looked like and my daughter told her, right down to the cheap clip at the top and the way the assistant smelled like hairspray. When we left the cafe, my daughter caught her reflection in the pastry case glass and didn't pause to adjust herself, and it felt like watching someone whose decided mirrors are for checking spinach out of your teeth and not your soul. I'd filed something with Consumer Protection the day before, but the woman on the phone had suggested we also report the passport collection to the police, so we did that too. The station had that municipal smell of old paper and coffee burned an hour ago. A boy with a skateboard sat under a poster about bicycle theft and tried to yawn without crying. The officer at the desk had a tan line from a wedding ring he must only wear on weekends. He started with patience worn smooth by a long shift, but then my daughter said the part about the passports and the part about blood types for insurance and I watched him put his pen down, re-angle the form, and asked her to say it again while he wrote carefully. He asked for names. We had a few. He asked for emails. We had those too. He asked if we had any of the forms. We didn't, because velvet pouches do not give receipts. He gave us a case number that didn't look like anything but a string of numbers until we walked outside and my daughter repeated the numbers back without looking at the paper. She's always had a memory like a net that lets through only the leaves. Sunday, lunch, at my wife's brother's house smelled like roast chicken and the inside of a good bakery. The adults made awful small talk for the first 10 minutes because everyone was relieved and also pretending they weren't. The no photos rule was in place like a soft cord around a museum painting. My daughter washed her hands then put out cutlery and let my niece put glitter stickers all up her forearm, until she looked like armor. We got through the meal on normal, which felt like moving furniture back where it belonged after a party. After coffee, his neighbor dropped by with a baking dish to return a woman with a deep laugh that came out surprisingly high at the end like a hiccup. We stood in the doorway talking about a fundraiser and recycling bins and I was luxuriating in how unglamorous it all was when my daughter stiffened by the coat rack. On the street outside, crossing toward the square, was a friend. The one with the long hair and the practiced smile and the blowout that looks expensive even when you can tell it's second day. Beside her, the millionaire's son, who in daylight looked startlingly like a regular boy who might have once owned a skateboard and forgotten it at the police station. They didn't see us until they did. My wife's brother put a steadying hand on his own front door like that could hold in a whole afternoon. The friend's smile registered us and recalibrated without missing a beat. She said hi, like this was all terribly French and civilized and we were neighbors popping by a florist. Her coat was the kind of beige that requires a car with a driver. She asked my daughter how she'd been, the vowel stretched, the casual cruelty held behind her teeth like a mint. The boy man-eyed the roast chicken bone on my brother-in-law's plate like it was a relic of a lost civilization. He said, very clearly, that his father had frozen his accounts last week because he'd embarrassed the family with a late-night photo. The friend's smile faltered for a fraction. She pushed more speed into her voice and mentioned a Milan mastermind, better crowd, better sponsors, and I watched my daughter's shoulders settle like a plane landing on a short runway. She said no. Not a big dramatic no, just the word as if it had never been complicated, and then she stepped back inside and asked my niece if she could borrow a sticker for her other arm. The friend said cool the way people say cool when they slapped a sticker over a crack. That night, after everyone had been brave for a full day and the house had gone soft and dumb with the radiator's chewing noise, my daughter knocked on our bedroom door with her phone in her hand like an injured bird. A girl she didn't know had messaged her on a throwaway account with a cartoon of a swan for a profile. She said she was in St. Moritz. Different influencer, same velvet pouch. Her passport had been taken for logistics, and now the concierge said the organizer would have to return it, but the organizer wouldn't pick up. She'd sent crying emojis into the void until my daughter replied. I am not an international man of anything. But I had an email from the hotel we'd been to, the nice man in a blazer that fit properly who had thanked me for my video and written about reviewing procedures. I wrote him, not caring that it was late and that Switzerland had its own clocks. He answered 10 minutes later. Hospitality has its own saints. He gave me a number for the night manager at the property the girl named. The night manager picked up on the second ring and sounded like the world's best librarian con voice, fast mind. She took the girl's name, the event name, the room. She thanked me for being the kind of father who sends emails at midnight. I stared very hard at her words because I didn't feel like any kind of good thing. 28 minutes later a message popped up on my daughter's screen, a photo of a passport cover in a hand with chipped cherry red nails, the caption a punctuation of relief, got it back. Shoot. Dots after. Then, later, another note, deposit supposedly non-refundable, but I wrote to my bank, thank you. 3 U's, like a prayer. Tuesday, my daughter went to therapy again. She came home with an index card the therapist had given her with handwriting in blue ink that had the rounded loops of a teacher. 5 lines, list things that feel true and cost no money. She left the card on the counter while she made tea and I pretended to study the biscuits. Later I found it next to the kettle under a dusting of steam. Warm bread. Late sun on the tram seats. The dog that tries to climb on your bench but is too shy. Washing my hair and letting it dry without a machine. Walking without heels. There was a 6th one smudged into the corner like she'd written it and changed her mind, not checking if men are looking. We had a small setback tucked into a good day. The influencer posted a montage, expensive lobby, expensive arm, expensive laugh. A caption about jealous energy, poverty mindsets, evil dads who stunt their daughter's feminine choreography. The comments were a chorus and then a dodge aisle and then a tie that receded as quickly as it had come because the internet is a restless god. My work email received a message from something calling itself Global Goddess Legal again, this time with a PDF attachment that was 1 page of French language templates and another page with roses in the margin. I forwarded it to the case number email and to the reporter. The hotel we'd spoken to sent a short note back that made me feel like I was reading Policy Get Born, new requirement for all private bookings with wellness themes to file attendee identifications with the hotel in advance, no third-party collection of documents on site, staff trained to watch for velvet pouches. The man from the staircase at the hotel watched like somebody's mortgage slid out of a side alley in the part of town near the therapist's office on our way out. He wasn't there for us, he was just part of a city's accidental choreography. He tipped his head the way men like that do, universal and proprietary at the same time. He pretended to mistake me for a valet, which told me everything I needed to know about how he organizes the world. He slid a card toward my daughter without looking at her eyes. I took it out of the air like a fly and put it in my pocket. Later, at home, I took a photo of the card and sent it to the officer with a tan line. The card said concierge introductions and had a phone number and a logo that looked like a coat of arms, if a coat of arms had gone to club school. The officer wrote back, thanks. Seen this one? Pattern. Please tell your daughter to avoid this area for a while. I told her. She sat on the stair with her hand over her mouth and nodded. Then she asked if we had any more of the good tea. She started going through her closet. Not a perch. A soft adjustment. She took the dresses that make you hold your breath when you sit down and listed them on an app, writing the truth in the description like it was a seat belt, wore once, tight, didn't feel like myself. A girl in another city sent a message with a question about measurements and my daughter wrote back, careful and kind, and when the sale went through, she folded the dress into tissue paper and drew a little sapling next to the address before she sealed the package. She kept one black dress and said, in the tone you use when you make an appointment with a later version of yourself, for something I actually want to go to. At night, when the house has stopped performing, she opens her laptop and the cursor blinks like a small lighthouse. She doesn't slam words down the way she did when she was 16 and the story lived in her fingers, but she sits there anyway. I passed by and saw a line before she closed the screen with theatrical caution, women as currency is not my math. She saw me see and for a second we were both ridiculous with the instinct to pretend it didn't happen. It's nothing, she said. It's not nothing, I said, and we left it there. We are trying out boring like it's a new food. We argue about whether fennel is a vegetable we need. We take the long route to the post office so we can walk past the bakery, that smells like Sunday even on Wednesday. My wife reads her passages from a book about bad science that made her mad and now makes her laugh. My daughter sets her alarm 10 minutes earlier and turns it off without snoozing once. She asked me today if she could call her mother this weekend. It landed in the room like a glass catching a bee. I said of course. I said I'd be in the garden when she did, pruning nothing with more attention than I've ever paid to a plant in my life. Small things keep arriving like unplanned mail. The reporter sent a draft, and it read like light through a dull window. There were quotes from other girls who used words like allowed and expected and deposits, and not one of them sounded like a fool, which mattered to me. The hotel chain wrote again to say they had cancelled 2 upcoming events for non-compliance with new ID policies. The officer with a tan line sent a longer note that he didn't have to write, saying a complaint from last month at another hotel had led to a fine after staff had tried to keep passports overnight for coordination. He called it theft in plain language. He thanked my daughter for her statement. Tonight, we ate soup that was too salty and nobody minded. The safe hummed behind the sofa like a sleeping animal. After dinner my daughter went into the hall to throw something away and I heard her say, "Not to me, not to anyone, just to the air above the bin." No, the same way she'd said it on the sidewalk, and I realized how much of courage is practice. The radiator clicked like it was applauding from the wings. The house did its job. Safe. O-ring. Full of small, stubborn lives choosing themselves on purpose.